Hello, Jaclyn. How are you doing? Welcome to
I
Retirement Your Way.
well, welcome and thank you for having me, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here with you as always. And, retirement your way. That is such a catchy name, a beautiful name, and it's the truth. I mean, we are talking all things retirement, how to make it individualized, how to create a strategic plan for your listeners and your viewers. And most importantly, how to retire with confidence and clarity. So I love it, Debbie.
I agree. I agree. Well, I tell you, after my own life experiences, and I discovered that retirement was not what I thought it would be. I thought, I like the idea of actually planning it the way that works for you, and it's not a one
Mhm.
size fits all.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, we need a designer up in here to design our outfits, right? Well,
Well,
Debbie,
hopefully, I'm pretty good at helping you design your retirement.
yes. Oh, I love it. Well, Debbie, I think that you have some news to share with our listeners because you've been dealing with something this weekend, and I don't know whether it's a positive or a negative right now, but I'll let you share that news.
I turned it into a positive. Uh, it's unusual for us to get a lot of snowfall in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. I mean, some parts of it do, but where I live, we tend to be a little protected. And this weekend, we had some pretty intense snow. So we personally got over 6 inches, which is more than the yearly average for us. And it was beautiful. And it snowed consistently for about a day and a half, and it's still on the roads. We'll probably be out of school for several more days because we're just not equipped to handle it here, but it is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I know. And you
Just
sent
too
me,
cold.
yeah, you sent me pictures that were absolutely beautiful. I mean, your house kind of sits
Yeah,
on a hill, and you've got just the white fluffy snow is what you had, and
yeah,
that is beautiful. In Minnesota, we don't tend
it
to get
really
that.
is.
We tend to get the yucky brown,
Yeah,
driven on. So it's so nice to see that for you to be able to enjoy it, go for a walk with,
it
your
was gorgeous.
husband, and dress nice and cute. You got cute winter clothes.
Thank you. Well, I tell you, it was fascinating the other night, midnight. I go into the great room and look out, and just because of the moon's reflection off of all of that white, it was almost daylight outside. And I looked out my door, and there were 7 deer just standing there watching me. Just
Wow.
fascinating, and just so still and quiet. And then we had a little coyote up on my front porch the next morning
Uh-oh.
because I could see his little paw prints. And
Oh, see, okay, I
uh,
I would be terrified. That's where it crosses the line with me.
it was inside. I was safe.
Yes, yes. Well, do you have any dogs or pets or anything?
I do have an adorable little chihuahua who is
Okay.
definitely a mama's boy. And so I'm very careful when I take him out. I take him out on a leash because we have hawks and eagles and coyotes. And he did get out the other day and chased a deer, which I kind of wonder what he will do if he ever catches him. But he is a chihuahua. He's chased the wild turkeys, which would definitely do some damage because they're enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
He
I
thinks
think
he's
I
much
would
bigger than he is.
I would pay to see him, just bark at a deer and a deer just kind of sit there like, "What do you think you're doing? And do you really think you're going to scare me away?" Like I could stomp you in an instant, but I tend to
Yes.
think that deer are too nice for that. So,
I think so too. Now, the turkeys are not the wild turkeys are a little aggressive.
yes.
One of them would not let my husband into the house a few years ago, and it was rather he was rather
Ooh.
intimidating. They puff up really large, and
Ooh.
they could do some damage.
Yikes.
So
Yeah. Okay. Well, to move on to our conversation, speaking of damage and also you know, just what life brings you. This brings us to the topic of life insurance. And Debbie, you've
yes,
touched base on, your past experience by losing, a husband and also becoming a widow and what that really means, and what it means for a lot of different things and different aspects of your life. And so I think this is a great topic to touch on and why and how, life insurance matters to you, your life,
Yes, it
your
does.
significant other, your family. There's so many reasons why it matters. So let's dive in. Where should we start with this?
Sounds great. Well, I'll tell a little bit about my story just because I think I've mentioned in the past that I chose to remain ignorant about much of our finances. I just already had enough on my plate. And so when I can remember when the insurance agent came and met with my husband and I did not even really want to discuss the difference between whole life and term life. It's just like, just make a decision. Just,
Mhm.
you're the finance person. You just decide and go with it. And, of course, we did get whole life insurance, which when George died, just automatically gave me a sense of peace because I knew I had that coming to me. And so financially, right away, I knew I was not going to be hurting because of that life insurance. Now, we did make some mistakes along the way. And one of them, when we first, purchased life insurance, the initial thought was if one of us died, we wanted to be able to pay off the house. Well, that was 6 houses ago, and the cost of that house was much less than the house that we owned when George died, and we had not increased it enough to actually totally pay off the house. So if I had it to do over again, I would have increased that life insurance. So I think that's one thing that a good financial advisor will continue to touch base with you. Are you covered? If something happens. And so a good financial advisor will have those discussions with you. Do you have enough life insurance to do what you actually wanted to do? So I thought today we talk about some of the values of why life insurance is so important. And first, I think, well, and this will apply to you because I think, since you are going to be married in the fall, you
Mhm.
need to have and I'm sure you have, but newly married couples, or even before you get married, you need to start having that discussion of, okay, what are we going to do for life insurance,
Mhm.
and definitely meet with someone. Personally, I think you are better off if you deal with an independent insurance agent because then they can shop around and get the best deal for you. If you tend to go with one who just only represents one life insurance company, that's all you'll see is their
Mhm.
best, or hopefully their best. And that may not actually be what is best for you. So personally, I like dealing with independent insurance agents. That way, you have a broader base on which to deal with. And a good one will shop around for you and get what is best for you because, like I said, it's not a one size fits all. So, why do we need life insurance? Um, I guess the primary reason is it guarantees protection for those that depend on you. Especially depend on you financially. It could be your family, it could be your business, it could be your children, your grandchildren. Um, and it ensures that financial safety net. And it truly is a safety net. For me, I mean, I would have been okay without it financially because, we had other finances, but it did give me a sense of peace because I knew I didn't have to touch those retirement funds. I didn't have to actually have to worry about that initially. So the safety net, I think, is huge. The peace of mind that gives you is huge. Um, it can replace a lost income,
Mhm.
and especially for those that are older. I mean, I've met with people that, you know, if one spouse dies, they lose one of the Social Security. And if that's their only source of income, that's enormous. I also have clients and individuals that I met with that had life insurance. So at least they knew, okay, my income that's coming in is only Social Security, but we had a life insurance policy. So I know I'm not going to lose the house. I know I'm not going to, be out on the streets. So I think that's enormous. That safety net is just a lifesaver for so many people. Um, but
Yeah.
why would you have it? It can pay off a mortgage, which I think is huge. It can provide finances for childcare or healthcare issues, tuition for college. It can. preserve your business if you have that. It can also eliminate debt. So I think that's just an enormous safety net. And especially if you've lost that spouse, I think it's so important. I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. And, to kind of go back to the basics a little bit, life insurance is an insurance. You pay what, a
Mhm.
monthly on it, Debbie?
Normally,
Yes. So,
yes. I mean, some people choose to pay it yearly, but the majority of the people pay for it monthly.
yeah. So it's like an insurance. So you pay, for coverage each month. And, it's going to be based off of premiums, basically, based off of your health, your age, all sorts of
Yes,
things
the
like that.
age,
So it's better to,
your
yep,
job.
absolutely. So it's better to, get into it or start it when you are young because then the
You're
premiums
younger.
will be,
Yes,
smaller and a smaller amount. And so then it's typically, lifelong commitment. You're paying into it monthly. And then that will eventually, once you pass, that typically will go to your spouse or your kids or whoever your beneficiaries are, which I know last week we touched base
yes,
on beneficiaries and the importance of them. And so that's
yes.
also with life insurance. So it's an important thing to have because you wouldn't think about not insuring your vehicle, not insuring your home, same thing. If something happens,
That's right.
it's your person, your ability,
Mhm.
and it's really important to have for loved ones and basically your legacy.
I agree. And again, I do have some clients that have paid off. They paid for it for a certain period of time, and that's paid off. And now they're actually getting, like dividends back, or, they may have to cash it in at some point. So, in some respects, it does, well, in a lot of respects, it does more than just provide a safety net if someone dies, because you can use that to replace lost income. You can cash in. I've had clients who've actually cashed it in. I have retirees that need additional income, and they had paid on this life insurance, all this time, and suddenly a life happens situation and they need more money. So they've actually borrowed from their life insurance policies. You can pay that back, or you can, actually keep that. So it's a great safety net, not only to provide for people once you have lost someone dear, it can actually provide a safety net while both of you are still living.
Mhm.
So I think it's just beneficial in so many ways.
Yeah, it's
And
almost
it's less expensive now than it was when I was your age because we're
yes.
living longer. So I've actually been able to improve people's life insurance policies when they are in their 50s and 60s because I've gotten them better rates and more
Yeah.
coverage. So that's one thing I do when I meet with clients is let's look at your life insurance and see if we can improve it. And to be able to do that without having, a medical clearance is really huge.
Yeah. Well, and like briefly mentioned just a little bit there was, you can tap into it kind of,
Yes.
whenever you please in a way. I mean, asterisk there, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people or some people, they use it as kind of a savings account.
Mhm.
It's not just
Yes.
a once you pass, it's a savings account. And so when you're, kind
Uh,
of putting into it without even looking every month, right? You're paying those premiums, you're paying the
right.
amount every month. And it's like we said, you set it, you forget it. So you don't have to worry about
Yes.
it. It automatically goes in there and that's your money to use.
Yes, it is. I agree. I would not recommend using it like a checking
Mhm.
account, but it is great to have that as a safety net. And I know quite a few people that have used that. They've borrowed their own money,
Mhm.
which is what they're doing. And the majority of them pay it back. And I would encourage them to do that when you can, pay it back. But it's a safety net of a whole different
Mhm.
kind while you are both still living for a couple. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it's better to get it when you're younger. There are some wonderful optional riders now with life insurance policies. For example, you can often put extra into it without going through that all without that medical, because as we get older, we tend to have more medical issues. So if you can get a rider that will let
Mhm.
you add to it, that would have covered me, for example, as my houses got larger and more expensive, to add that additional coverage. Um, I think that's important, and to be able to have that. There are riders that the money can be available if there's a chronic illness, um, or you can purchase for your children. There are riders that will
Mm.
let you do that, buy a rider to put your children on it. So I think that's especially important.
So
Um,
I do want to ask you, Debbie. There's different types of life insurance. So can we touch base on
yes,
what the different types are?
yes. Term life is one that you see a lot with business owners. For example, if they own their own business and if something were to happen to them, what's going to cover the cost of that business and keep it going, and to replace that income. And so it's for a period of term years. So you may have one that lasts until you are, well, as long as you own the business, or until you are 60 or 65. Whole life is, pretty much what it says. It covers your entire life. And so that tends to be more expensive because, you know, as you
Mhm.
get older, the likelihood is you're going to die at some point. So term life has an end date, and whole life is for your life's entirety.
So when you're talking about, your whole life basically, or
Mhm.
sorry, term life. Let's go back to term life here.
Yes,
Um, if you set it at a certain date, so let's say you're 65, right? And that's what you're paying for.
yes.
Do you get that lump sum when you turn 65, or how does that work?
It varies on, for example, what riders you have. Plus, insurance companies are usually pretty good about coming and saying, "Would you like to convert to whole life?" Or it will give you options to extend it. So, when I say there's an end date, there's an initial end date to a term life policy, but there are ways that you can extend it. There are ways that you may say, "Okay, I no longer need this. Let me cash in this amount." You're not going to get that full amount. You're not going to. It's not going to pay you what the whole life has, because term life tends to be less expensive than whole life.
Mhm.
But there are options with it. So it's something that you need to have a conversation with your insurance agent on a regular basis, or your financial advisor. With me being a financial advisor, I not only handle the rest of the finances, I also deal with life insurance. And so I'm able to encompass everything for them. And I think that's beneficial because I see how it affects everything in their life financially, not just the life insurance aspect
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And everyone has different things going on in their life, whether you have kids,
yes,
whether you don't, whether you have a spouse, whether you don't. Same thing goes with the business, like you said. And so there's no
yeah,
right way of doing life insurance. It's so important
I
to
agree.
discuss with a financial advisor because it's going to be different for everyone. And Debbie, you touched base on it, but it's so important to find a financial advisor that shops around for you. Because when
Yes,
you look at insurance, car insurance, home insurance, you shop around for the best rates and what will work for you.
I hope so.
Yeah. And so, you
Yeah.
would do the same thing for your life insurance. We're talking lifetime here.
Yes.
You
Hmm.
definitely want to do your research and also have a trusted professional in your corner with this.
I agree. One mistake that I see far too often is that people will rely on their life insurance that they have through their job,
Mm,
which is great. I'm glad, I'm glad that employers do that for their employees. In many cases, not everyone does, but if you've got a great job that pays well, and that employer has a part of life insurance policy, the majority of those stop the day you leave that employer. And I've had far too many retirees say, I did not think about needing it at 67.
mhm.
My life insurance stopped at 62. And suddenly life is more expensive. Things are costing us more. And what's going to happen to my spouse if I die? And I didn't die while I was still working, thankfully, but that life insurance ended when I quit that job or when I retired. And so I think far too many people rely on that life insurance that their employer provides, which I'm glad you have it. But, you know, we are living longer, and the majority of people live past, quitting that initial job and career. And
Mhm.
so I think life insurance that you own personally is important. And I think that's what we need to realize. You own that life insurance policy. It is yours. It's your money.
Mhm.
And so, you have options on when and how you have to use that.
And so, and and when we talk about doing life insurance with a spouse, I'll use myself as an example here. When
Mhm.
we get married and we choose to do life insurance, is it typically a individual thing? So you're always doing it individually, or is there something that you do as a couple, or how does that typically work, Debbie?
For me personally, I like doing it as a couple, because the reason a couple gets life insurance is to provide for their
Mhm.
spouse if one of them dies. So I think making that decision jointly is important. I also think it's important that both that both people truly understand what you are doing, unlike what I did if I don't want to know. uh, so I think having those discussions as a couple is really important. You always have the option of doing it individually. Um, it might be a red flag though if your spouse is getting life insurance on you and you don't know about it. uh, that might lead to a trial down the road. So I think you need to be knowledgeable about that, and actually someone should not be allowed to take a life insurance policy out on you without your
Yes.
knowledge. So that is a red flag. Uh,
But so what you're
yeah.
saying is that when opt into life insurance or you're paying for the premium basically, you
Right.
can pay for it as a couple. So you're paying
Yes.
for it as two people versus just individually.
Now it tends to be you tend to have, I mean, it's not a life insurance policy on both of you that you both have to be living, that it is, you have life insurance on both of you, but you make that decision as a couple. Now, when my late husband and I first got married, we put less insurance on me than we did on him because we assumed that his career was going to be earning more money than mine was. And
Oh.
so we needed to replace his salary versus my salary. um, Hindsight 2020, that was not the case because I furthered my education, went and got a couple more degrees. And so my income was pretty much on par where his was. And we made the mistake of not upping my insurance. My insurance was basically going to cover funeral costs,
Mhm.
expenses along that line. So I think that was definitely a mistake that we made. Now, when I remarried, and we had the discussion about life insurance. One thing that we did that I really am so grateful for is we actually put a life insurance policy on me. And my daughters are the beneficiary. And the reason we did that is because we live our bucket list. And so I wanted to be able to leave both of my girls something from their father.
Mhm.
So that was a legacy that they were getting from their father. And that life insurance policy on me ensures that they get their money. So even if I go through all of my retirement, all of my own life savings, they are going to receive that money from their father because the life insurance ensures that. Another technique that I've done with clients, especially if they do not need an income on something that I'm doing for them financially, and they want to leave a legacy for their kids, they are doing it with a life insurance policy. And one of the beautiful things about that is they get that tax free.
Mhm.
And so that legacy becomes even bigger because if you inherit, a non-qualified, or if you inherit cash, you're going to pay taxes on that. And with a life insurance, the beneficiary does not have to pay taxes on that. And that's enormous. So you've left, not only a larger legacy, it's much less of a headache for them. So it's a great estate planning tool to use. And, you know, who would think that at 62 I'd get a life insurance policy on me? But yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And last thing I want to say because I know that we are sort of running out of time here. But
yeah,
it's so important to consult a professional because this is
yes,
another thing that you recommend to a friend, you recommend to a family member. Um and the wrong decisions are made because you are
yes,
listening and you're trusting in a close person. But in reality, every single situation is different. And so what works
yes,
for them is may not work for you. So it's so
I
important to
agree.
not make decisions without proper research and without using your
Mhm.
individual plan to make that decision.
Don't rely on Google.
Yes. Yes. No chat GPT.
A lot of it. There's a lot of bad advice out there. But a
Absolutely.
good financial advisor is going to help you with that. And the fact that you're going to have annual reviews with them and you'll touch base on this and continue to update that if needed, I think is very important. So learn from the mistakes that I make and don't make those.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I love learning from your mistakes. So, I mean, we'll keep that going.
Well, I'm glad.
Well, Debbie, can you share with our listeners how they can schedule a complimentary consultation with you and, give Andy a call?
Oh, I agree. Well, I tell people that Andy has the largest fan club of any non-celebrity I've ever met. She is quite popular with my clients. They're often upset when I show up and she's not with me.
Yes.
But she's a godsend. I count my blessings every day that I've got her. But the easiest way is to contact my office at 866-247-5695, or you can find me on our Retirement Solutions Group Facebook or retirementsolutionsgroup.com.
Well, sounds great, Debbie. Anything else before we close today?
Stay warm. Next week, I will be taking a little bit of a break and we are going someplace warmer. Taking a little break. So I look forward to seeing you, not next week, but the week after. And our time together does go by quickly.
Yes. Yes, it does, Debbie. Well, I enjoy the warm weather. And listeners and viewers, we will be back in a few weeks. And that does it for this special winter episode of Retirement Your Way with our host, Debbi Marcum.
Thank you.